Welcome students to another day in the Foods Lab. Today we're going to be moving along our journey of discovering different types of breads and how we deal with them. And we're going to be working with something called a soft dough. Again, batters versus doughs. Batters are going to have more liquids compared to less flour. The ratio is different. And with your doughs, this is a soft dough, you're going to have more dry ingredients, more flour compared to liquids. And because of that, the way that you handle the food and the way that you handle the bread product as it's being prepared is different. Previous to this demonstration, I've gone ahead and washed my hands for 20 seconds. I have read over the recipe. I've got all of my questions answered. I have assembled all of my ingredients and I have assembled all of my equipment. Today we're going to also be looking at learning two new cooking terms. One of them is cut in and one of them is knead. I'll bet you maybe know this one, but maybe not. This one, maybe that's going to be a new word for you to learn today. So since I've already done that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I have previously also done step number 1, which is to preheat the oven to 450. That's going to take a little bit of time, so as soon as you get to moving, get that started. In fact, before you assemble anything, I'd say, well, come to class, first thing you do is got to preheat that oven. All right, I'm going to place my recipe to the side, and let's go ahead and get started then with step number 2. It's very specific at telling us what size of mixing bowls we're going to be using. Step number 2 says in a large mixing bowl, you're going to measure and add the flour. Notice how much more flour we're using. But it doesn't matter that we're measuring more, you still need to measure it accurately. You get too much flour in these ingredients, or in these mixtures, and they end up being really super dry. So remember to stir, and then with a large spoon or some sort of spoon, you're going to go ahead and scoop that gently into your measuring cup. There's one, and make sure you get that second one in. Can you think back to when you did the quick bread? When you did the banana bread, how much flour there was? Like 1.5 cups for 4 loaves. Quite a bit different. So I've got 2.5 cups of flour. I'm not going to put my flour away, not going to put it too far away because I'm going to come back and use that later on. It says that now I'm going to be using 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Baking powder is baking soda plus a dry acid. Those are the major players in it. And this is going to make it so that I can just use something as simple as milk. I've got 2 teaspoons of baking powder that I'm going to put in here. Again, make sure that you're getting baking powder, not the baking soda. And then I'm going to use this straight edge that's found in my can. Hopefully I have enough baking powder here. And level that off. Looks like I'm getting down to the bottom. There's 1, 2. Notice how much more baking powder you would use too. If you can think back to that banana bread, use quite a bit less, like a half a teaspoon, I think, of leavening agent. And of course, this is the thing that's going to be taking and giving off the gas. So we need this. This is going to give off the carbon dioxide gas and make this poof up just a little bit. I have a half a teaspoon of salt. These biscuits are kind of a classic American food, but they haven't always been around. Used to be that flour was expensive, and though we associate biscuits with Southern cooking, well, going alongside of our fried chicken, it used to be that the wheat flour was only for rich people. So in the time of the Depression, when things fell out of the bottom of the market, dropped out for those that were growing wheat, the cost of wheat came down, the cost of flour, wheat flour came down and made it so that anybody could have it. For that time, cornbread was what most people were going to be taking and consuming. I also have a little bit of sugar. This is going to have just the slightest bit of sweetness, and it says 4 teaspoons. And I happen to know, do you, how many teaspoons are in a tablespoon? Do you remember? There are 3, so I'm going to measure 3 all at once by using my tablespoon. You can do that, or you can do 4 teaspoons with your measuring spoon, with your teaspoon measuring spoon. Pop those in there. Now I've done step number 2. And at this point, it says that we're going to run it through the sifter. And you all know how to use the sifter, hopefully. We're going to take a piece of wax paper and and place that on our countertop. We are going to grab that sifter on over here, and then I am carefully going to direct this into our sifter. This is again just a way of mixing our ingredients, our dry ingredients, more thoroughly, because we're concerned with that protein called gluten. We don't want to overwork it, not with this type of a mixture. This is a soft dough, and we want it to stay kind of soft. I'll run this through my sifter, and when I get done, do you remember how to wash the sifter? You remember that? Did you say that you're not going to put it in the sink because you don't want to be cleaning out all of the little holes of that metal mesh net with a toothpick? That would be the right answer. Don't want to do that, so how do you clean it out? You're going to use a damp washcloth, and you're going to clean that out. If this were a damp washcloth, let me grab one. Damp washcloth, you're going to clean the outside, the inside, the out. You do it very thoroughly so all the flour's gone. If you don't clean it thoroughly, you're going to be feeling like you're good friends with weevils, because they will come after you. All right, I'm going to take this mixture very carefully and pop it back into my bowl. And then on step number 4, it says you're going to cut in. Again, this is one of our new words. We're going to cut in the shortening. The shortening that I've got here is a half cup. I'm going to be using my dry measuring cup. I am going to be using my flexible spatula, and I'm using the pack method. I like to have my shortening nice and cold when I do these biscuits. I think it makes a lighter, more flaky biscuit. And again, I'm packing this in here. So if your shortening feels a little bit cold, you're going to know I've had it in the refrigerator for you. That also takes and extends its shelf life, or the amount of time that I have before it starts to go rancid. Have you heard that word before? Okay, and then after I packed it all in, I'm going to take this straight edge and I'm just going to level that off. After I get that all scraped off of my flexible spatula, I'll come back in here and pop that into, carefully, I don't want a face full of it, into my bowl. Then you're going to find your pastry blender. And the pastry blender, these aren't sharp. In fact, some of you might even just have wires that are wound around. You're going to take this and you're going to be cutting in by taking and pressing that down, and all those tines are doing is they're chopping up that shortening. I need to mix these ingredients, again, without the water being present, because as soon as I add the water, then we're going to be working with the gluten getting strong and elastic, and I don't want it strong and elastic. So I'm doing all this pre-mixing just to kind of help me not have to do all of that mixing later on and ruining my product. So I'm mixing this up, I'm just chopping, can you see that, up and down, and I'm cutting it in until the shortening's in little teeny tiny pieces. Those of you at home, if you don't have a pastry blender, you are instead going to be using just 2 table knives. And the way that you do that, take a knife in both hands and you'll just go start cutting like this. That's the way they used to do it. That's how it's originally got its name. Somebody came up with a pastry blender just to save a little bit of time. So after you've gone ahead and chopped this in, cut it in, the shortening into the flour until the pieces of shortening are really nice and small. Let's pull out some and just put them in my hand. When you get them so they're really small, can you kind of see? Maybe I've got a piece or 2. They're just little tiny pieces. Then you're going to be good to do the next step. And we are mostly done with this pastry blender. Okay? Take this and place it to the side since we're done with that. And the next step says in a small mixing bowl. So let's place this to the side. In a small mixing bowl, we're going to beat the egg. So I've got 1 egg right here. And I'm going to go ahead and crack that open. I'm going to try to crack it open. It's not cooperating, so I better do my other finger. I'm going to stop and wash my hands. If you think you got anything on it, you must stop and wash your hands for that 20 seconds. Because you don't want to be cross-contaminating and getting bacteria from one thing onto another before you go ahead and continue on. I'm going to use my whisk. Oops, it looks like I have a tiny bit of, and I've thrown, no I haven't. Let's get this eggshell out of here. That was not a good experience for me. If you want, or if you have a little shell in there, a little piece of shell, you can go pinching after it with your fingertips. But it kind of is like chases away from you. But it sure likes the membrane that's on the shell, and we can use that to our advantage. All right, I've got the egg. Then it says we're gonna add in some milk. And I got my liquid measuring cup, and I'm measuring a half a cup. I've got it on a flat surface. I'm scrunching down to eye level. I'm gonna add in my 1/2 cup of milk, and then I'll pop that in there. And I'll continue combining those till they are all looking as one. And now it says we're gonna add this to this. We're gonna add the liquid to the dries. This is very common to do when you're doing the biscuit method. And we'll take this. You remember when we did the muffin method, which was the one with your banana bread, we added the dries to the liquids, but this time we're putting the liquids to the dries. Sometimes you'll have people put a hole or a well in the center. They'll just push their flour out so the water can go right to the bottom. And then this is very specific. It says don't overmix it. You're stirring it with a fork so the liquids can go through and get the dries wet without moving it too much. So I'm going to stir this just until it's coming together. See if you can do this in about 15 stirs. That's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, am I gonna make it? 14, 15, okay, I'm not, 16, 17, okay, now I'm mostly all together. Can you see that? It's not gonna be, it's kind of thick, but it's not super thick, and it's a little bit sticky, and that's what a soft dough is. But in order to continue stirring this together, I've got to get it on the countertop, and I'm going to take and knead it. So when I do this, it says that we're going to knead it about 10 times. I want to put a little tiny bit, not a lot of bit, but a little tiny bit of flour on my countertop. This happens to be the 1/2 teaspoon measuring spoon. This is what I'm just going to try to keep this super small. Maybe a little bit, kind of. I'll put that on my countertop. I'm gonna put some onto my hands, and I'm gonna rub this together. Then I'm going to roll that out. I don't want a lot of flour because I don't want my biscuits to be super dry. That would be no good. Like a mouthful of flour, that's no good. And I'm gonna pop this out on my countertop. Maybe I could use a spoon here. Mrs. Wiscomb, let's get the spoon out to scrape that all out. The fork's not gonna do too great of a job. And pop this all together. And now I'm gonna knead, okay? When you knead it, it's not playing with Play-Doh. When you knead it, you're going to be mixing with the heel of your hand. You're gonna fold it in half, push, rotate. So here we go, and it says very specifically about 10 times. So I'm gonna fold it in half, push, rotate, fold, push, rotate. You need to stop and get a little more flour in your hands, do it. 4, 5, 6. I'm gonna grab just a little bit more flour, not a lot. Put it on my hands. This is 7, I think, 8, 9, 10. I don't want to put any more flour in this than I absolutely have to. That's the deal. I'm going to get rid of this little bit of stick that's on here. One thing you might want to use is even your pancake turner. How about your straight edge metal spatula? I'm going to grab just a little bit more flour, just the tiniest bit. And I don't want to add it in advance. I only want to add it as it needs it. Put that out here, and then we're going to go ahead and place this down. We're going to be using our rolling pin. When you roll this out, don't get too excited and get it too thin, because then you're going to have the wrong biscuits. Your biscuits you want to have fluff up tall, probably about a good inch, so they double in height. And if you get them really skinny, then you're going to be having hockey pucks. So I'm going to roll this out to about a ½ inch. And you have a built-in measure. It's from the tip of your finger to the base of your fingernail. Tip of your finger to the base of the fingernail is about a ½ inch. Right now I'm about right here, so I'm going to roll it down a little bit, but not a super lot. If it sticks to my rolling pin, I'm going to put a little bit of flour on it. All right, let's measure. Perfect. It's about right there, a nice ½ inch. You'll be using a biscuit cutter, and when you do this, I like to put just a little bit of flour on that to begin with. When you do it, don't because you might seal the edges. Also, this holds true if you're trying to use a cup. The biscuit cutter's better because it has a skinnier metal, but you could use a cup at home. That's originally how they used to do it. And then you'll just pop these out. Can you see that on my cookie sheet? And it says I'm going to be making about 10 to 12, and the best ones are going to be the first ones. So when you go to cut these out, get them as close on your dough to cutting them out as you possibly can, because they are going to be your very best ones. So I've got 4, and depending on the size of your biscuit cutter, I've got a couple of different sizes here at school. Maybe you'll get a little bit more, maybe you'll get a little bit less, just depending on which biscuit cutter your head chef picks up. All right, I'm gonna get that. I've got 7 of them right there. Now we're going to take this dough and we're gonna bunch it all together, but I don't wanna over mix it again. I wanna get it just together, so I'm gonna these are not gonna be the good ones. They'll be okay, they'll taste the same, but their texture and their look will be different. And I'm gonna put just a little bit of flour back on here so that I can get them up. And again, I'm gonna just press that down slightly, and with my rolling pin, I'm just gonna roll that out so they're about a ½ inch. So let's go, right, can I get 2? I'm gonna hope I can get 2 out of this. Here's 1, and then there's my second one right here. Come on, guys. That right there is 9. And can I get a 10th one out of here? This one's gonna be the ugly one. All right, I'm kind of stretching my dough around to kind of get the edges all underneath that would be poking out. I know that they'll explode kind of weird. Let's roll this right here as best, but I don't want to get it too thin, so I'm kind of being careful. All right, looks like about a ½ inch. Let's pop this in there and pull this out. This right here is my 10th one, and this right here I could throw away, or let's make it into one. And let's just kind of push it down a little touch, and that right there is my 11th one. So we'll put these in the oven. We're going to bake them, it says, for 8 to 10 minutes. You always set the timer for the least amount of time, and when that timer goes off, you can check them. They're going to grow up tall. They're going to be lightly browned on the top, but don't bake them too long. The longer they bake, the drier they get. And then we'll pull them out, put some honey and some butter on them, and yum delicious. These, my friends, are biscuits, a little bit of Americana.